welcome to the new episode of How with Hassan El-Houry, Wharton MBA 2007, our first guest from a non-2004 class. Hassan, welcome.
Thank you so much, Elena, for having me.
It's a pleasure. There's been a massive popular demand to hear your story. So why don't we jump straight into it? Hassan, tell us about how you grew up. Siblings, family, who influenced you?
All right. So I was born and raised in Kuwait. Kuwait at the time was very different from what it is today. But anyway, I was raised in Kuwait, and then in 1990, of course, there was the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq, by Saddam. And at that time, we drove, my family and I, from Kuwait to Baghdad and to Amman, and we spent 2 years living in Cyprus. And I would say that's probably the single most influential event in my life. After that, we spent 2 years in Cyprus. We moved back to Kuwait, and I spent the rest of my childhood in Kuwait. I then did my bachelor's degree at the American University of Beirut. I worked in Kuwait in auditing and consulting with Arthur Andersen and then Ernst & Young. I did my compulsory military service in Lebanon thereafter. And then I went to Wharton and I did my MBA. To be honest with you, Elena, Wharton was my dream school since I was about 18 years old. And being accepted and finally going to Wharton was a dream come true.
Wow, that's wonderful. And tell me a little bit more. How did you cope with that massive disruption in your life?
So the details are actually quite interesting. That year, 1990, we had spent the summer in Beirut, my family and I, my parents, my brother, and my sister. And we had a great summer. And then the night before the invasion, we were driving to the airport. And I remember my uncle telling my father, don't go back to Kuwait. There's a very high likelihood that Kuwait would be invaded. Why don't you spend the rest of the summer here in Beirut and see how things play out, and then you can decide if you want to go back. And my father said, there's no way that an invasion would happen. We're going to go back. And we ended up driving to the airport that night. We flew to Kuwait. We arrived. The exact next morning, the invasion happened. Our stuff was still in suitcases. We had literally arrived probably 10 hours before the invasion, or 12 hours before the invasion. So it's an interesting story, and I think it's one for the books in the future.
And how old were you at the time?
I was 11.
Oh, wow. And how did you feel?
So interestingly, I thought the invasion was going to last for a few weeks, and then everything would go back to normal. And our school had given us 3 or 4 books that we had to read over the summer, and I had not read them. And so even during the invasion, I was frantically trying to finish those books, thinking in a few weeks I'm going to go back to school. So, as a child, you don't, you generally don't digest, major events like this so quickly and so easily. So I was trying to finish my summer reading before school starts, and it was a few weeks away, and I thought this is a few week thing, and I'm going to be back in school in September.
And how did you adjust in Cyprus? What kind of school did you go to?
Interestingly, Cyprus was a very popular destination for a lot of refugees from Kuwait, and funny enough, by pure coincidence, 2 of my best friends ended up in the same school and same classes as I did in Cyprus, by pure coincidence. And so, I guess there was some connection, some feeling of being at home. And I made a lot of new friends, and the school was very welcoming. The teachers were very welcoming. Cyprus generally is a very welcoming very welcoming country, and I have very, very, very fond memories of my time in Cyprus.
Hmm. And how did your parents were able to adjust, get a new job and everything?
So it was difficult. It was very difficult to spend 2 years in Cyprus. My dad did go back to Kuwait, even while it was under occupation. My mom stayed with us. It was very difficult for the two of them. In fact, I think it was probably much harder on them than it would be on us. Just the thoughts going through any parent's mind, given such a big shock in the environment, is tremendous. And being a parent now, I can't imagine how hard it must be to drive your family through two countries under occupation, and then living as somewhat of a refugee. I mean, we didn't live in a refugee camp or anything. We obviously had a very nice house in Cyprus, but just being out of your comfort zone, away from your friends and family and everything is a very difficult experience.
How did that influence you?
So before the invasion, people growing up in Kuwait were very, very, very spoiled. Kuwait is and was a very wealthy country, and as a child, you had pretty much anything you wanted. So we were very, very spoiled, and I think the invasion taught us that nothing is eternal, and you have to work hard, and you have to plan ahead, and you have to save, and I think it was a complete game changer for us. While in the short run it was very negative, in the long run I think it taught us a lot of lessons. My family and everyone I know, essentially, um, that there is a much bigger world out there, and that you need to work hard, and the privileges and the leisure that we had pre-invasion is not sustainable and is not the real world. So there was a lot of learning, I think, from that single event.
I can only imagine. What did your dad do?
My father is a civil engineer, and he moved to Kuwait in around 1976, I think, from Beirut. He graduated from the American University of Beirut, which at the time was, the Harvard of the Middle East, or the MIT of the Middle East, if you will, especially in engineering. So he was, top student, top academic, and moved to Kuwait, and led many projects, many construction projects he oversaw, including some of the major highways and bridges in Kuwait. So it was a very and Kuwait at the time, because they had just discovered oil, was all about building infrastructure. So engineers were in high demand, and he was doing very, very well. My mother was also working when I was younger, and then she left her job later. But when I was younger, my mother was also working.
What did she do?
So my mother worked in administration a lot. She worked in a movie production company when I was younger, and then she later worked in a tech company, in an IT company. So she also had a pretty interesting career, especially later in my life.
Mm, that's awesome. And you said that Wharton was a dream come true. Where did that dream started?
So it started when I was at the American University of Beirut. I was reading a magazine, and the magazine was talking about the world's top MBA programs. And of course, I was looking. I was studying business, so I was looking at the rankings, and I expected to see Harvard and Stanford and MIT and these names. Then I saw this school called Wharton, and I said, "What? I've never heard of this." And I decided to do some research, and I did some research, and I found it very interesting that this school that I had never heard of is ranked number one in business, and the graduates are some of the most successful and influential people around the world, and it has a big focus on quant skills and analytical skills. which is something I've always cared for. So I said, that's where I'm going to go. And I did everything I could from 18 till I was accepted 20 at 25, I think, to get into that school. And I won't mention any names, but I was accepted to some of the other top business schools in addition to Wharton. And I turned them down and I chose to go to Wharton. And in fact, I remember the dean of one of those top business schools, and whose name shall remain anonymous, called me up and said, Hassan, I don't understand. People do not turn down our university to go to Wharton. And I said, with all due respect, this is my dream and that's where I'm going. And the dean at the time asked, is it financial? Are they offering you a scholarship? We can match it. I said, actually, the university is not offering me a scholarship, but it's my dream come true. You can offer me anything under the sun, but that's where I'm going. And they respected my decision, and that was that.
Back to your undergrad experience, you were already demonstrating leadership. Tell me a little bit more about that.
In my undergrad, interestingly, I was somewhat of an outsider because I wasn't born or raised in Lebanon, and so the only time I ever lived in Lebanon was the 4 years of my undergrad and then later my military service. But at that time, the only period I had lived in Lebanon was my university, and I was appointed as the president of the business school in my 4th year, which was a tremendous leadership experience and a very exciting experience for me. And I enjoyed every second of that. It was very busy, very challenging, very difficult, very interesting. I learned a lot, and I would say it was it was a tremendous period in my life. And I enjoyed it so much that when I went to Wharton, I also ran in the student government elections, and we were lucky enough to to win the confidence of our fellow students, and we served 1 year in the in student government.
Oh, wow. And you said that was an appointed position. Who appointed you and based on what?
So there were elections, but the elections included a very small number of people. So at that time, it was just the people who were in the student council. They can appoint the incoming, let's say, leadership. During my time, we changed that and we made it an open election where all the students in the business school could vote. But when I was appointed, that was not the case. So I used the word appointed instead of elected, whereas at Wharton it was a full-on election. I mean, we had 1,600 people who were eligible voters, which is quite a number, to be honest with you.
How was Wharton for you?
Wharton was great. Wharton was great. If it was 3 years or 4 years, I would do it again and again. Absolutely.
What did you like the most?
I think there are so many things that I liked. I liked meeting new people from all over the world, from different backgrounds, different experiences. I enjoyed serving my fellow students and the administration and the school. I enjoyed meeting with the employers. They have all these breakfasts and lunches and dinners. That was interesting, with all the companies trying to schmooze the students and win them over. I enjoyed some of the leadership ventures were exciting. I did Quantico and I did a couple other leadership ventures as well. Those were interesting. I enjoyed the classes. Some of the classes were remarkable. I remember I still use the valuation class, David Wessel's. That's probably the single most important class I think of Wharton, at least from the classes that I took. Then there was the geopolitics classes that I took, which were super exciting. And there was all kinds of interesting classes. Operations, OPIM, we called it OPIM. I don't know if that's still the name for it. So there's all kinds of interesting classes that we took. And until today, I have lifelong friendships that I built in the 2 years that I was in Philadelphia. And a few weeks ago, I was fortunate enough to be a guest speaker in one of the classes. And today, I received an email to be a guest speaker in another class in March of next year. So I look forward to that as well. So I remain involved in the school. I chaired our reunion twice. So I remain involved with the school, and I'm always available to support and help the school however I can.
That's awesome. And speaking of Quantico, that brings me back to military service. What can you share about that?
So at the time, military service was compulsory for young men in Lebanon, and I tried to avoid serving in the beginning, but that did not work, and I was forcibly drafted into the military. So I did my 1 year. The 1 year includes a few months in camp where you receive training. You wake up at 4 a.m. and you have to do all these exercises, and then you need to shave and shower and shave and get dressed in your uniform with your beret and everything, and then you do classes, a lot of classes about military law and strategy and all these kinds of things, history. And then we spent a lot of time marching. We just marched for hours on end, just marching up and down. And I think it was a great way for the officers to spend time because we did a lot more marching than I thought was even possible. But be that be that what it may, I think I learned a few things. It improved my Arabic significantly, which was good. I also got to meet with young men from all over Lebanon. And although Lebanon geographically is a very small country, it is very diverse. And being in Beirut, with going to going to the American University of Beirut, you don't get to meet with people from all walks of life, unfortunately. And the military service gave me that opportunity. So I met young men who were completely illiterate; they could not read and write. I met a young man who had never seen an airplane before. I met some people who um, did not have the privilege of using shampoo. They had never used shampoo. So it really introduced me to all kinds of people from all walks of life and all walks of society, which I think was a big eye opener. And I think that is probably one of the benefits of having the military service is the different strata of society get to meet one another and get to interact with one another and build relationships across the whole social spectrum, if you will.
Hmm. How did it help shape your leadership style?
So, first of all, it improved my Arabic, as I said, which in my current role is very important because I do a lot of business with Arab government, especially in Kuwait and some other countries. So, Arabic is important, written and spoken, and obviously reading. So, so that helped. It also, I think, made me a lot more humble because you realize that at the end of the day, luck is very important. It's only luck that I was born where I was born to the family I was born to. There was someone else who was perhaps less fortunate, born to a poorer family from the north or the south or the east of Lebanon. And it's just luck. It's a lottery. He did not win the lottery. I won the lottery. So you just have to be humble and realize that they also work hard. They're also smart. They also try their best. But you are largely the result of of your environment. It's the environment in which you are born and raised plays a huge role in who you end up becoming in later in life.
How did you decide what you wanted to do? What was your summer internship?
So I graduated in 2007, which was the height of the economy. Economy was doing very, very well. And everybody in my class had three, four, five offers after business school. And I was no exception. I had a few offers which were in New York in investment banking. I think I had one in California in consulting, and maybe one in London. I think. I mean, I had some really interesting offers from some of the brand names, if you will. And I also had an offer from a logistics company based in Kuwait called Agility. And Agility had very, very big ambitions of growing and becoming one of the largest logistics companies in the world, which it did become. And the chair of Agility is a Wharton MBA himself, a very, very a visionary, a true visionary, and an amazing guy all around. And I had this offer from Agility, which was an exciting and interesting prospect. So I went to the vice dean for the MBA program at the time, Anjani Jain. And given my work with the student government, I had a relationship with Anjani. And I said, look, Anjani, I need some advice from you. You have seen thousands of MBAs come and go. And I'm stuck in this conundrum. I have these offers, they all seem interesting. What would your advice be? And he said, and he asked me a few questions, and he said, look, if you go to one of these big banks or consulting firms, you are 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000. They have so many MBAs from the top business schools. You're just a number. But if you go to this logistics company based in Kuwait, the chair is a Wharton MBA. There are a couple other Wharton MBAs there, and they're all amazing people. You will be 1 in 5, and you will really have an opportunity to drive your career in the direction that you would like it to, and you would have a clear path to a leadership role. So my advice to you, Hassan, would be take the offer in Kuwait. I also spoke with my father, who gave me the same advice. And so, lo and behold, I signed the offer, sent it back, and I joined Agility in Kuwait in the corporate development team, which was headed up by a good friend of mine, also a Wharton MBA, called Rashad.
And how did it work out?
It worked out great. Probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. So I worked in the corporate development team for about 1.5 years. I was asked to join the board of this little-known airport services company called NAS, National Aviation Services. And I said, okay, I'll join this board. I joined the board of the company and quickly realized that the management team of that company was subpar. The company had huge potential in Kuwait and outside Kuwait, but the people leading that company were subpar. So I went to the chairman and I said, look, this company has potential, but I think, in my opinion, we need to change the management team. And he encouraged me to take on a leadership role in that company. And I resisted at first. I said, I've never run a P&L before. I don't know anything about aviation. Let us do a proper executive search for a proper, seasoned aviation manager or CEO leader, and let's appoint him or her to that role. And I can work with them, but I think you need somebody who's experienced. And he said, no, I don't think we need to do that. You go in and run that company. And I said, okay, I'll do that for a few years, and then I'll see something else to do a few years later. And here I am, 12 years later, still running the company. And I would like to think it's no longer a little-known Kuwaiti company. We've become a regional player now.
So what was the first thing you did?
I spent a lot of time understanding the company. I spoke to as many people as I can. I spoke to as many clients as I can to understand what their thoughts are of the company. I spent a lot of time meeting with the employees in the company, the managers, the directors. I spent a lot of time learning about aviation. I met with the regulators quite often, to be honest, to understand their views as well as the regulator, what their expectations are from us. So I spent a lot of time just learning. And when I felt like I had learned to a reasonable level, we changed the entire management team. There was a CEO there. In addition to myself, we asked him to leave. We changed the CFO. We changed the head of HR. We changed the head of procurement. We changed the head of government relations, the operations. We changed pretty much everybody in the management team. There was a few people who remained and still remain until today. But otherwise, I think most people were asked to leave and were replaced with professional people.
How challenging was it to recruit talent?
It was very challenging. Talent is not easy to come across, especially when you're a small company with big ambitions. So when you're a small company with big ambitions, you're trying to hire people not for where the company is today, but for where you see the company in 5 years or 10 years. So you're trying to hire people who are larger than the company is at the time. So so you have to really win them over. It wasn't easy, but I think we were successful. So a lot of the people who joined in the early days are still there today, and if they're not with us today, we still have an excellent relationship with them. And I think that's one of our strengths, is that there's continuity in the leadership of the company. So the clients, they know that they're talking to person X, and person X has been around for several years and will continue to be around for many years to come. And it's the same with the employees. It's the same with the regulator, with everybody. So we the team that we have in our company is pretty much, we're pretty much like a family. We know each other very, very well. We know one another's families. We spent Pre-COVID, we used to spend a lot of time with one another. We would travel together. You don't want to be stuck on a plane for 10 hours with somebody that you barely know or that you don't like. So the fit was a very important component when we were hiring people.
How big was the company in terms of headcount and revenue then versus now?
When I took over, we were in, I think, two airports. We were in Kuwait and we were in Aqaba in the south of Jordan. And I think we had maybe 400 or 500 employees at that time. And we weren't really very profitable. Today, we are in more than 55 airports in 25 countries. And I think we have about 10,000 employees. It's a big growth.
Wow.
And in fact, we had more employees right before COVID. So 2019 was one of our best years, was in fact our best year. Um, and we had a lot of employees. Unfortunately, last year with COVID, we had to ask a lot of people to leave just in order for the company to survive, given the pandemic and the almost complete suspension of flights all over the world. But we are now looking at rehiring a lot of those people, and a lot of them are joining us back. So I would say today we have about 10,000 employees, give or take.
How did you manage to keep the morale up when COVID started and there was this complete uncertainty about how long this would last?
When COVID hit, we obviously didn't know, like anybody, was it a 1 month thing, a 3 month thing, a 6 month thing, a 1 year, 2 year, 5 year? We had no idea, right? Nobody did, essentially. And we really had to do with the little information that we had. So the first 3 months, I would say, of the pandemic, which essentially were March, April, and May of last year, we focused a lot on cash, and we had a lot of receivables from our customers, airline customers, and of course the airline customers themselves were very cognizant of their cash as well. So they were trying to delay payments as much as they can or renegotiate terms or whatever. Naturally so. I mean, we did the same thing. But we obviously needed the cash. We needed the cash to pay employees, to keep the lights on, rent, whatever. So we spent the first 3 months trying to collect all the money that we had out in the market through the receivables. And I think we did a pretty good job. We collected more than 90% of the money that we had outstanding. And one of the largest and most significant things we did was we centralized our collections function. So historically, each country did its own collections. We centralized that so that we can leverage essentially our group leverage with our customers. So as I said, we collected about 90% of the money that was outstanding in the market, and we realized this pandemic is not ending. So the next thing we did was we went through a very strict cost reduction exercise, and we had to make a lot of painful decisions which were unfortunate at the time, but that served the company's survival essentially. So we reduced more than 40% of the cost in the company, and some of it is cost that goes to serve customers and the operation of the business. But there was also some fat, naturally, like any company. There is a layer of fat that just accumulates over time. And so, we started off obviously with the unnecessary fat, and then we went into the operation and shrunk as much as we could. We also, tried to reduce people's salaries as much as possible without affecting livelihoods. And we spent I would say 3 or 4 months doing that, and it was a very painful exercise. But I got a lot of messages from people who were asked to leave, and they send me messages saying, Hassan, we know that you as a company have asked us to leave, not out of choice, but out of necessity. So please, whenever there's an opportunity for me to come back, please reconsider me. And those were very touching messages that we received from our team members. So after the cost cutting exercise, we then started to look at opportunities, because we realized, well, this pandemic has now lasted more than 6 or 7 months, and there's no end in sight. We did I would say two things. The first one is we spent a lot of time on technology, and we actually developed the world's first COVID passport, and it was used in Kuwait very effectively, and some other technology solutions that we used in order for us to support repatriation flights and certain flights around Kuwait and Africa. And then the second thing we did was we started to look very opportunistically at companies to acquire or new countries to enter. So a lot of companies in our sector were struggling really bad as a result of the pandemic, but they didn't have the cash or the governance or the support to continue to operate. So we were very opportunistic. We launched operations in the past 1 year. We launched operations in 16 new airports, including Baghdad, the DRC, South Africa, Kenya, and Guinea-Bissau. So we managed to grow our business significantly, and I think there will probably be one or two more launches before the end of 2021. So we use this time very, very, very wisely to grow our business.
Wow, that's pretty incredible to go into offensive during this unprecedented time.
So I think companies should always be on the offensive. You always need to be in growth mode. And the minute that you are in stagnation mode, you naturally shift into shrinking mode. So companies need to be aggressive all the time, need to be growing all the time. At least that's my opinion.
Tell me about the book that you co-authored with Erica Koo.
So Elena, I used to spend a lot of time on planes, flying across from Kuwait into different parts of Africa and Europe, and it's 7, 8, 10-hour flights. And you spend the first 2 hours doing email, and then you spend an hour reading a book, and then there's still 6 or 7 hours left on the flight. And I would watch movies on my iPad naturally, like most people do. Then I said to myself, there's got to be a better way to spend my time, a more productive way. And I've always enjoyed reading, and I've always enjoyed thought leadership, so developing new ideas. So I said, I want to write a book. But what am I going to write about? So the one thing that I felt that I knew enough about to write a book was aviation in Africa. Now, I know a lot about aviation, but not so much about Africa. And so Eric and I put our minds together, and we said we would author a book on aviation in Africa. Eric is also one of our advisory board members, and he's a good friend of mine and somebody that I look up to tremendously. So we put our minds together, and we co-authored this book. And the theme of the book essentially is that Africans make up 12% of the world's population, but only 2.5% of the world's travelers. And our goal is to bridge that gap. How do we get more people from Africa flying? And we lay out the roadmap in the book.
And what is your vision for yourself and for NAS in the next 10 years?
As I said, I think what I would like to see is NAS becomes one of the top 5 largest airport services companies in the world. And we're working very hard in that direction. And I must say, Elena, I have a soft spot for Africa, and I would really like to see that aviation in Africa picks up as well. So I would like us to remain the largest airport services company in Africa, but I would like to see us one of the top 5 in the world.
Hassan, tell me, what do you do outside of work?
I'm the father of 3 boys. My eldest is 12, middle one is 10, and the youngest is 7. I spend quite a bit of time with them daily and on the weekends. Pre-COVID, I didn't spend as much time with them in the weekdays because I was traveling. But now I am, since I haven't traveled in a while, I am spending quite a bit of time with them, during the weekdays and the weekends. I try to exercise 3, 4, 5 times a week. I go for a run or a bike, or I go to the gym. I also enjoy swimming when I can. I'm trying to learn to ski, and I spend a lot of time reading. These are some of the things that I enjoy doing. I spend a lot of time with friends as well. I'm meeting a lot of interesting people here in Colorado. I fill my time up very very quickly. There's never a dull moment or boring moment.
Mm. Tell me a little bit about that. How did Colorado happen for you?
So my wife is born in Colorado, and 2 of our 3 boys are born in Colorado. We would, before COVID, we would spend all of our summers in Colorado. My wife and kids would be here for about 3 months, and I would come for about a month on holiday, fly in and out. And then when with COVID last year, my wife thought it would be better for the kids to move here, where schools were in person. In Kuwait, schools were online, and frankly, our kids were not learning as much as we would have liked them to learn. And we moved them here. We registered them in a school here, and I saw a big difference in their personalities as they attended the school here. And when it came time to register the kids for the 2021-2022 academic year, there was no clarity in the schools in Kuwait if they would be virtual or in person. So we registered them for another year here. And that's really how Colorado happened. So we've been here now for a year. I've been flying in and out, and we will probably be here until next year.
As a parent, what do you see as your top priority?
As a parent, that's a tough one. I think there are a lot of priorities. There are a lot of priority. I try to teach my kids a few, some of the values that I was raised with: working hard, being good to everybody you meet, and respectful to everybody you meet, remaining humble even when you feel like you're on top of the world. You should stay humble. And some days are you're going to find them very difficult. You just have to be patient and not give up and plow through. So perseverance, I think, is very important. Grit and perseverance, I think, are very important. I think sticking together as a family. So my children, sticking together, and then as a nuclear family, my wife and I and our 3 kids sticking together, and then as an extended family. So my kids with my parents, with my wife's parents, with my siblings, with my nieces and their cousins. I think as an extended family, we should also stick together. So that's also very important for us. There's a lot that I teach my or I try to teach my kids. It's not easy. It's not always easy. I would say parenting is very difficult because you with a lot of things in work, you take an action today, you might see the result tomorrow or next week. Whereas with children, with children, you take an action today, but you don't see the result until a year later or more. So you have to be very patient, and you're taking, you're trying to move in the dark, right? So you don't really know the impact or the reaction from what you do until several months or years later.
What advice would you give to all the prospective candidates, Wharton candidates, or maybe current students or recent grads?
For candidates, I would say 2 things. First one is never give up. So I had some people in my class who had applied to Wharton 4 or 5 times, and they were turned down before they were finally accepted. So don't give up. The second thing is, I would say, make sure that your application is coherent. I see a lot of applications where the applicant's essays say something, their recommendation says something different, their grades say something completely different, and their activities say something completely different. And I think that when the admissions committee reads the application, they don't get a full and coherent picture on who this applicant is. And the applicant might say, for example, I'm coming to Wharton to hone my analytical skills, but they have A's in math, and they studied math in undergrad, and they've worked in investment banking for 6 years, and they've done very, very well. Well, your analytical skills look like they're just fine. You need to be working on other things. So that's not a very coherent application. That I would say that those are the two pieces of advice I would give applicants. For people who are in the MBA program, I would say try not to sleep. Do everything you can and stay as long as you can, because those years that you spend in school, they end, and the real world is waiting for you. And the real world doesn't end. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. So enjoy the 2 years or 2.5 years if you're a law or MA student in addition to the MBA program. Enjoy them, make the best of them. Don't sleep, meet everybody you can, go to every single activity you can or every event that you can. And my advice after business school would be don't go down the beaten path. There are enough investment bankers and consultants. Try to do something that is different. And I promise you that you will do very, very well. Try to do something entrepreneurial. Try to go to a small startup. Try to go to a mid-sized company in a new country. Try something different. Go to industry. Go to general management. Go manage a P&L. Managing a P&L is real business. You have competitors, you have employees, you have clients, you have a board, you have shareholders, you have creditors. That's real business. That's where you put to use all of what you learned in business school. Don't go down and do what everybody else in your class is doing. That's not where the magic happens, if you will.
That's so powerful. And you are a living example of that.
But probably not by design, by accident.
And that's very humble of you. I don't think 50 plus country expansion happened by luck.
Maybe not the 15 country expansion, but me running a P&L was, as I said earlier, it wasn't something that I was excited to do in the beginning. And now I'm grateful that I did. That's why I said it wasn't by design, not by accident.
That was a very gutsy move. We'd like to ask this question at the end.
Sure.
Please complete the sentence. To me, Wharton is the place blank.
To me, Wharton is the place where dreams come true. And I think Wharton is a platform that opens so many doors, so many possibilities, in fact, endless possibilities. And if I could go back, I would do it again and again and again.
Hassan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
And we thank our audience for watching this incredible story and these incredible lessons. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And stay tuned for more episodes.
Thank you. Bye-bye.